Jesse Helms would hold fundraisers and would hold up a book of Robert Mapplethorpe's photographs and go, now y'all come on down here, men only. This is strong stuff. I don't want any women to see this. Now this is garbage that we all are funding. This is homosexual trash. This is anti-Christian, and so on.
Tom Tresser has been on the front line of America's cultural and political battlegrounds for over 50 years, from fighting for the survival of arts funding during the 1990s culture wars to challenging civic corruption and advocating fiercely for creative professionals to step into political leadership. Tom is a relentless defender of democracy and freedom of expression. Hey there, it's Angela. As co-founder of the Civic Lab in Chicago and a veteran grassroots organizer, Tom boldly declares that the arts and nonprofit sectors must shift from advocacy to activism and from activism to running for office. Get ready for a candid and provocative conversation. This is ARTS Redefined. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm well, thanks for bringing me on your air here, Angela.
I'm excited for this conversation. I want to just start out. I typically jump in. My first question to you is, how did we get here?
Well, if we're meeting here, where a psychopathic, autocratic, Christian national, women-hating, human rights abuser, science-denying billionaire is the president of the United States, if that's the question, I'd have to say the arts and our nonprofit brothers and sisters are partly to blame. The other side, if you will, the far right, the business class, or however you want to describe what we're up against, has been busy at work to get people elected since at least the early 70s. And their playbook is out in the open for anyone to see. So what is the goal of what I'm calling the other side? It is to take America to the 80s when we have chattel slavery, or let's just say as many people working for nothing, not just black people, but as many people as working for nothing as possible, where business is unregulated, there are no income taxes, women are chained to the loom, Christian Bible is the law of the land, and there's really no central government other than a strong army. That, in my opinion, is what the other side wants and what they're getting. So all that has been out in the open. And when they came for the arts in the early 90s, I don't know if those of you who are on this call and watching this video will remember Culture Wars. Google it, young people. You'll see a set of characters and actors and politicians came to destroy the arts, or at least federal support for the arts, public support for the arts in America. And the question is, why did they do that? What happened? And what was our response? So all this happened in plain daylight. It was very ugly.
Can you go into that a little bit? Because you and I were on a national call and you brought this up. And, I was graduating college in the early 1990s, and my focus at that time was politics and journalism. So I wasn't really paying attention to the culture wars. I've certainly heard of it and I know about it, but you were in it. So can you teach us, what was it like? What was happening then?
Well, so at the time, I was a very successful theater producer here in the city of Chicago. It was a non-equity theater, and I was probably the most successful producer running. I had 3 shows running at the same time twice, and that was my world, in the theater, working in the theater, 24/7, no private life, and not really aware of these larger plate tectonics. And the League of Chicago Theaters had a retreat the summer of 90, and we were told that the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, was coming up for renewal, which is normally a routine thing, but it was under attack, and it was completely new to me. I was just like, what? Well, our little theater didn't get National Endowment for the Arts money, so that was one of the reasons why perhaps I wasn't aware. But I got quickly schooled that Senator Jesse Helms, a Republican of North Carolina, who at that time was in his 70s, a former Democrat who fled the Democratic Party in the 60s when President Johnson pushed the Civil Rights Movement and the Voting Rights Act. So a lot of Democrats turned Republican in a racist manner, and Helms was one of them. So I'm learning about this guy. And then also Reverend Pat Robertson of something called the Christian Coalition. And at that time, he was probably in his late 60s, perhaps. Reverend Pat Robertson was already a hugely successful evangelical preacher. He had massive fundraising and a radio show and an 800 number. And I mean, he's the kind of guy that when there was a flood somewhere, he could go on his radio show and raise $1 million, and there would be 5 trucks from his church going right to that flood site, like in 5 minutes. Usually successful gentleman. He ran for president in 1988, and he switched to his support to Bush first and formed something called the Christian Coalition based on his presidential campaign. So he was already turning, let's say, the apparatus of Christian ministry, evangelical fundamentalist Christian ministry, into politics.
So what?
So with these players in place, they started targeting arts exhibits that they found objectionable. Now, there were several artists who received NEA money who took the wrath of these gentlemen and their allies. One was Andre Serrano, a Latino artist. I don't know if he was gay or not, but he had a piece called Piss Christ. And it was a small piece. It was, I believe it was his own urine in which a crucifix was placed. And it was called Piss Christ. And that got these guys so angry. The images of that was throughout their world, and it was used as a fundraiser to raise money to attack the arts. And the Christian Coalition was the primary vehicle there, but also focus on the family, a gentleman, Reverend Frank Dobbs from Mississippi, Tupelo, Mississippi. But there was also Karen Finley, a performance artist, Tim Miller, who I believe was gay, another artist, and there was also the famous photographer, Robert Mapplethorpe, whose images are very beautiful and provocative, but he had a series called, I think it was the X Portfolio, which were a very stark. I mean, there was a guy with a bullwhip up his ass and all, you know. All right, so that's Mr. Mapplethorpe, but he and I don't know if people remember Patti Smith or know Patti Smith the artist, but they were roommates in the Village in the early 70s. And so this sort of punk rock and alternative music and these very beautiful and somewhat troubling images, they're all swirling around at this time. And I think if you put those artists together, you know, maybe they got $100,000 in public money, you know, but Jesse Helms would hold fundraisers and would hold up a book of Robert Mapplethorpe's photographs and go, now y'all come on down here, men only. This is strong stuff. I don't want any women to see this. Now this is garbage that we all are funding. This is homosexual trash. This is anti-Christian, you know, and so on. And so when the Christian Coalition and their allies would come across an exhibit anywhere in America that had any of these kinds of images or that anything they found objectionable, they would launch a campaign to defund the arts in that jurisdiction. And I have mailers from such attacks from Clearwater, Florida to Anchorage, Alaska. So what would happen in the case of Clearwater, Florida? It was a community college that had an exhibit, and there was, again, an image in there that had some Christian iconography in there that a local pastor found objectionable. He called the Florida Christian Coalition, and the next thing you know, the Clearwater City Council and the Florida State Legislature were flooded with letters and phone calls. So what is this happening over and over again? They're raising millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. They're activating their base. So you get a letter and you respond. That's a signal to the Christian Coalition that I'm your guy. You throw the letter out and you know, that's also information that they can use.
So,
but I'm just saying the net effect of all this over the early 90s is that it poisoned the well for any what I would call robust support for the arts in America to this day.
So that's great, because in my mind, I'm thinking of young people who are coming up and hearing this story, and we now face the Kennedy Center being taken over. They're going to cut any show that they deem not patriotic. Drag is under attack. DEI is under attack. We got through the 1990s culture war. Tom, how is today any different? We can just get through this too,
I
right?
don't think so. You got the president of the United States who is he's a proto-fascist. He's an autocrat. This is a guy who doesn't believe in the rule of law. I mean, he said just 2 days ago when the courts were trying to rein him in, he says, I don't have to listen to the courts. You know, he has the army. This is unprecedented. He has both houses of Congress who will bend to his will, and he has the Supreme Court 6-3. And he's probably someone's going to die. I'm sure he'll probably get a chance given his luck. So it'll be 7-2. And the Supreme Court under his command has already ruled him immune. So anything he does in the name of the presidency, he cannot be prosecuted for. So that's unprecedented. So yes, what we're seeing now is just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm begging the arts community and our nonprofit brothers and sisters like the ACLU and the nurses and the educators to stop haranguing us with all these panicked, frenzied, hand-wringing messages. Yeah, it's too late to do anything about it, kids. Don't send money to the ACLU for a lawsuit. It's not going to work. It's a waste of friggin' money. People are wringing their hands. Should we take the money from the NEA? Should we boycott the NEA? Should we forget about it? Waste your time. There's only one thing, Angela, that the American nonprofit, including the arts, to do, and that's we have to run for office. We have to run for office.
So where are our leaders in this country that are champions and defenders of the arts? Where are they? And what are they saying?
I wish I had a good answer for you. This call that you referred to is the Americans for the Arts. Now, this is our vanguard, premier, self-described champion for the arts in America. They suck. They're completely incompetent in this. They should all resign, I think, from their posts. I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar operation. They've been on the scene since Culture Wars, and they're part of the reason why we lost the Culture Wars. I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but this is the time for harsh introspection and truth-telling. And if I'm wrong, I'll be happy to face anyone in any forum and have a debate. J'accuse. I just say to not just the leaders of the Americans for the Arts, but for the Theater Communications Group, Music America, Opera America, the guys that run the museums, and even the American Institute of Architects. Any group that is supposed to be focusing on creativity and freedom of expression, let's say. Stop studies. No more studies, please. I don't want to hear any more studies about this, that, or the other thing. We're very brainy over here on the left. Not that to say that there are no smart people on the right, but we love studying stuff. We love convening, and we love a commission. Stop it. No more.
So I want to just interject and say I believe that the arts are nonpartisan. We were fortunate here in Ohio when during the pandemic, and I led a statewide coalition during the pandemic and lobbied state government, and we accomplished $160 million for nonprofit arts in 3.5 years from arguably the most conservative Republican caucus in state history. So my whole drive is that it's not left or right in the arts, it's for all, and we just have to be able to reframe to resonate. We have got to reframe our impact to resonate. I'm going to fast forward because I also feel like we need a renaissance of relevance. And that's where I think, you come in, and this is where you struck a chord with me. And when I was talking with a colleague a few weeks ago about that, she said, well, who needs the renaissance or what needs, and I also say we need to revolutionize how we think about and invest in the arts. And she said, who needs to be revolutionized? Is it the agencies or is it the organizations? And I said, everybody, because I get the sense that everyone is waiting for the other to come save them.
Yeah. Well, the only guys that are going to save us is us. But we need infrastructure and we need some leadership. So when someone like me comes along and says to an artist or someone in the creative field who's already in their 30s, you should put aside your easel, so to speak, or your pen and run for office or help someone run, it is such an outside argument. There's no chance of it landing. That's why the Americans for the Arts and all the other nonprofit service agencies have to be in on the training, inspiration, and equipping mode. So no more convenings unless there's a leadership track where someone from the arts or nonprofit world who has run and won and is governing with justice and love, for science and creativity and peace and equity, can come before us and tell us their story. And then I can train them, or others like me can train you on how to run for office, how to translate your skills and accomplishments as a creative professional into public life. So it's not a given that even someone who is, say, a successful designer or ballerina or whatever, should she decide to run for office, she doesn't know how. So this is where I'm just so frustrated with our service organizations, because they're the platforms for communication, inspiration, training, and eventually equipping our peers to run, because that's what the other side has done, Angela, for 50 years. There's something called the Leadership Institute. So if you're curious about any of this, just Google Leadership Institute and spend a few minutes on their website, and you'll see these guys have been training conservatives to run and win since 1979. They have 400,000 alumni. So now we get on a side trip on the infrastructure of what the other side has done. Again, this is what our leaders should have been doing, should have been studying these guys and replicating it for us, which they haven't done. Now, I've tried here in Chicago, I've trained about 5,000 people in the civic arts to run and win and be smart, organizing and whatnot. But that's a nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. We need 100,000 people who I call servant leaders to run in 2026 and 2028 if we still have elections. We're not sure. You know what I'm saying? We're not sure. And who's running? Well, I want 10,000 librarians, 10,000 artists, 10,000 nurses, 10,000 doctors. You know what I mean? 10,000 architects. Come on, librarians, if you're listening to this, you're watching this, you know I'm right. You're getting killed. The Moms for America, whatever they're calling, are running themselves for school boards, and they're turning our libraries into battlegrounds. This is happening right now, and we're just sitting by and watching. I'm so frustrated. I used to have hair, but it all went away from this.
In my arts policy and advocacy class, we had two student government representatives come in and pitch to this. It's an arts management. These are arts management and arts majors. And after the student government pitch, and they are not part of the Arts College of Arts, when they left, we asked the class, would anybody consider running for student government on campus? And there was just nothing. And I mentioned our conversation, and a young woman raised her hand and said, what do we do about the barriers to entry? And I said, explain that to me a little bit. And she said, well, the whole notion of running for elected office, whether it's school board, local, et cetera, typically those are lawyers or business leaders. They're not arts. We're not smart enough to do that. And I said, we need to counter that thought, right? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, again, if it's not placed in your path, her reaction is perfectly understandable. So aside, your class is unusual. It should be a mandatory class in all schools of the arts and training. There should be a mandatory class on let's call it creativity and policy, in which these issues are placed before the students. They must go through them and consider it, because look, the First Amendment, which sort of guarantees our right to have this conversation right now, for you to do your thing, for that girl to do her thing, whatever she was going to be, a dancer or a singer, whatever her path was taking her. We're assuming that no one's going to come in stopping us. We're assuming that no one is going to say, Angela, as a writer, you must write good things about the president or you'll go to jail. I mean, what an absurd idea, Tom. No, it's the First Amendment is just a piece of paper in a glass box in Washington. It has no agency. But you can go through your career and never have someone challenge you to think about that. Do you have a responsibility, a creative person, a woman in Angela's class, do you have a responsibility to defend the First Amendment, or are you just going to suck off of it and assume it's always going to be there for you? So again, pretty thorny question to wrestle with. But if it's never placed before you, then you'll not consider it. And then the other side of that is, well, artist person, what are the skills and values you have that you use to be a successful creative person, and how do they translate into public life? Well, I can give you a few. What about empathy? Is it possible to be a successful, meaningful artist in the world without empathy? I say no. Is it possible to be a successful creative person without being able to do synergy, like 1 and 1 makes 7? No. Are you persistent? Do you walk through walls constantly when people tell you you can't do it? Of course you do. You walk through walls all the time in your practices. Now, all that seems mundane almost for me to go down this litany or this assets. I'm describing your assets. If I ask people like, well, how big is your Rolodex? And are you persuasive? Are you charming? Do you have charisma? Can you give a speech or make something in public that would persuade people or move people? Well, yeah, that's what I do. I'm a painter. Whatever. I'm a graffiti artist. Okay. All those things, Angela, are what people need to run for local office.
What do you say to those, though, who think about this and contemplate and then think, I'm already strapped and struggling where I am. I can barely make ends meet. We all know about, artists juggling 3 or 4 jobs, perhaps to mend together one livable wage. What do we say to those who feel overwhelmed and think, I don't even know how to go about this? How can I take on one more thing?
Well, again, I point my finger at the arts sector. They've made it to be like a lonely, pioneering person on the iceberg. The other side has set up infrastructure, places to get training, places to get money, places to be mentored. They have all that. We need to do the same. It should not be as lonely and as hard as you describe, but for the moment it is. So this is not obviously for everybody. So if there are 55, 60 million people in America who either make their living from their brains or who identify themselves as creatives, if only 10% of them got the itch, they're going to have to break the ice themselves until help arrives. I'm sorry. I wish I could say a better news, but since the Americans for the Arts are tone deaf, I applied to do a presentation in their upcoming big conference. They turned me down. They don't even want to hear this idea. All I'm saying is just give me a half an hour. Or an hour, and I'll to lay my case out before your people, or let me talk to your board, or anything. They're completely not interested. Children over there, most of them, I'm going to tell you, are on the young side. So what is their pedagogy? I'm sorry. I don't know if they've studied any of this stuff. Their older people or people on the board certainly should have been around the block a couple of times. I'm just so disappointed in our national organizations. But to your point, yes, they're going to have to do some research on, and there's a place called Go Run Lead. So you can Google Go Run Lead, in which you can get trained to run, and they have some help for you. They've got tool books and templates. So if people want to email me at tom@tresser.com, you can tell me what your story is and I can direct you. But obviously it needs architecture and infrastructure for this to be meaningful and not kind of some one-off, Tom does it and then nobody learns from Tom. And then Angela decides she lives in another part of the country. She could even get elected. But again, no one's telling her story. It's just a little blip. It has to be a coordinated effort.
Right. Okay. So acting on as the true entrepreneurs that we are, because I think creatives are the ultimate entrepreneur, and we're identifying a huge need and challenge, right? And rather than sticking our head in the sand, how do we begin then working around institutions that perhaps aren't taking up the baton and moving forward? How can we band together and move forward and do this?
Well, I hate to start another nonprofit. I've led 14 of them. I'm sort of down on nonprofits, as you can tell. However, if there's someone out there who has a nonprofit, it could be a state agency or a local service agency. The Fractured Atlas just popped into my head because I think they have done candidate training. So let's find an ally who's already in this space and let's raise a couple of $1 million. So if you're a funder or if you're a wealthy tech entrepreneur or a successful artist or entertainer and you're hearing this, you got $1 million to spare, call Angela. She knows what to do with it. She's got huge organizational chops and connections. And maybe there's an organization ready to take that $1 million right away. And what I would do is I'd do maybe 5 regional one-day training sessions, in different parts of the country. Call it, the arts in America, a call to service, and have a few inspirational speakers and performers who have this vibe of performative service. So maybe with a little bit of research, we can find the unusual person who's already served, has run and served. Like I know there's one architect who served in Congress. I know there was a radical anarchist cheerleader who got elected to city council. Okay. I know there was a architect and professor of design who was elected the mayor of Charlottesville. So I would say we got to gather those to us. And so this, again, so frustrating. The Americans for the Arts and their service organizations should have been surveying their people all along. It should be a list publicly known to us. We shouldn't have to start from scratch, but be that as it may, 10 of these regional training sessions, inspirational, appropriate speakers, and then let's get into it. How do you run for office? How do you message? How do you fundraise? How do you translate your abilities? A person could say, look, I'm tattooed. I got piercings. No one's going to. No. Put all that aside. Hey, I'm gay. I'm bi. I'm whatever. I'm trans. I'm a tall giant. I'm a midget. Whatever. People have all these barriers that they think will make it a non-starter. No, put all that aside because we'll find people like you who have broken the ice and paved the way. So these are people you would encounter at these 10 meetings. And then from there, you can vote yourself into maybe a 2-day workshop and go into deeper. Now, if we've done our homework correctly, all those people who've attended these regional meetings and have decided, yes, I will either run or will help someone run. Now we keep them together and we feed them some money. Again, so it's a thoughtful thing that's been pre-designed. You want to have not just your 1-2 punch, but your 1, 2, 3, 4 punch, all pre-planned, so that as people are coming into our world, we're giving them a roadmap and tools, and we're not just throwing them back into the sea. Good luck for you, Angela. Hope you make it. No, that is not what the other side has done. And then we help our people run and win, and we celebrate and we tell their story. So Tom, you won city council in Kansas City. Tell us your story. You're going to be on a baseball card, dude. We're going to make a bobblehead doll for you. We want to love on you, Tom, because you did this crazy thing. Tell us your story. So there's videos there. There are books that come out of this. You know what I'm saying? So we're in the entertainers. We're the guys who know how to tell stories. There'll be paintings of Tom. How will Tom be celebrated and remembered and taught in art schools and other places? Maybe there'll be a deck of cards with the 52 guys who run for office, and we may sell those for money. You know what I'm saying? All this stuff. We know how to do all this. It just has to be applied to civic life and winning so we can govern. Stop studying. We must govern.
Has this happened before? Meaning, was there a moment that we had something organized and then it fell off? Have we ever done anything like this in any sort of comprehensive way?
Not to my knowledge. I've tried over and over. I built something called the Civic Lab, Angela, in Chicago in 2013. The Civic Lab, I think, was America's first co-working and makerspace dedicated to civic engagement and social justice. So there were 16 groups working there every day. We had a green screen studio. We had a terrestrial radio station. We had a kitchen. We had a shop. We built things. We made things. We convened things. We had rehearsals and meetings and convenings. And of course, lots of solidarity. Oh, Angela, it's your birthday. Let me take you out. Oh, you're not feeling well, Angela. Let me get you some tea. You know, brotherhood and sisterhood inside the movement, because social change is a lonely business in America. We don't really help each other. The for-profit sector understands co-working. They understand accelerated labs. They understand, you as an entrepreneur know that, if you were to start a toothpaste brand, you'd have a million things to help you with your toothpaste. There'd be a working space, and there's a place to get money, and then the local chamber of commerce will celebrate you as a woman of the year. All this if you're making money. But if you're an innovator for justice and nonprofits, there's very little for us. And so I created the Civic Lab in an attempt to do that for Chicago. So we need spaces, physical spaces around America. Where's our leadership? I wish they had put some of their money into local spaces and places of labs for creativity and civics, where we go back and forth between the world of creativity and the world of civic engagement, because I think they're completely connected. The more creativity we see, the more democracy there is. I will stick to that assertion to my dying day. And we know that where authoritarianism and Nazis come, they kill the artists, they kill the professors, they kill the intellectuals, they throw the art into the fire, the books into the fire. We know that. And these right-wing nuts are doing that. They're doing it right now. So come on, artists of America, creative professionals of America. You know I'm right. You can't avoid your duty anymore. I'm sorry. It's your duty. Uncle Sam, Aunt Samantha needs you.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm making note. I'm thinking of Ronald Reagan, actor. I'm thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Then I think of Hollywood as a whole and the money that's there. Where I wonder what's happening on the ground. Are there, activists?
Well, I'd say everything I've been saying and sort of preaching is one part of my pedagogy, but there's another piece that I should also surface for you and make it part of this conversation. And that is, okay, it's Tom assuming that just because you elect creative people, they're going to govern properly. Now, I've had this conversation with some people in the arts, and they say, well, look, there have been movements to elect women to office, right? And now women are moving more into public office. But what is their pedagogy? Can we assume that a woman, just on the face of it, be she a senator or a president or a governor or a mayor, that she will do the right thing? A woman could be against abortion, right? So if you're someone who's for a woman's right to choose, just because we elect more women doesn't necessarily guarantee that we're going to have more freedom of choice and healthcare. So the question of pedagogy, and so what are we going to govern about, is another question that I have addressed. And I would say it's this: it's more public. So what's our end game here? It's to elect servant leaders from our world who are champions of science, service, equity, justice, creativity, and peace, but who also believe that the answer to our problems lies in the public sector, not the private sector. So therefore, more public ... fill in the blank. More public education, more public transit, more public health. I mean, we're still in a time of pandemic, and our public health system has still not met the challenge of COVID, not just in America, but all across the planet, because we've disinvested and strip mined the public sector. So that's kind of the mirror image of my pedagogy, and my mania here is that we need to invest more in the public sector as the end game for what's ailing us. So you're not going to charity your way out of racism. You're not going to charity your way out of hunger. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to charity your way out of homelessness. It's not possible. So I think that is another byproduct of what the right has done. You see, along the way to getting us back to the 1830s, far right and their allies have meticulously and ruthlessly devalued our belief in the public sector. Okay. And you mentioned Reagan. He famously said in his inauguration, government is not the solution. Government is the problem. And the scariest thing that you can hear is someone knocking on your door and saying, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And we have bought that crap, hook, line, and sinker. So those are the two pieces of my puzzle that I would place before you, that I would be happy to debate in any forum. In other words, if someone comes to me and says, Tom, you're dead wrong, it's the private sector that's the answer, I would have 1,000 answers ready to knock that out of the sky. And if you came to me and said, we don't need to do anything, we're helpless, we're hopeless, the artist is a piece of jewelry, we're just like extra cultural jewelry, I would have 1,000 answers why We are not. We are at the heart of the American experience.
Tom, I really appreciate your time. You've certainly given me a lot to think about and contemplate. I'm certain that you're giving whoever's listening to this a lot to think about. And let's hope that this is the beginning of our conversations and that we actually can gain some momentum and make something happen.
Thank you so much. Remember out there, democracy doesn't happen by itself. It's a participatory art form.
Thank you, Tom.